73 missed calls blinked on my phone screen before I could even feel my own legs again. That was the first thing my eyes managed to focus on when the anesthesia started letting go of me, the little red bubble sitting on top of the phone icon, glowing like a warning light in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and cold plastic. My throat was raw from the breathing tube. My back was wrapped in something that felt like a stiff shell of gauze and tape, and every time I tried to shift, a dull fire climbed up my spine and into the base of my skull. I could not sit up. I could not turn. I could barely blink without my eyelids feeling like sandpaper. But somehow my shaking hand still reached for that phone on the little rolling tray beside my bed, because 73 missed calls in 9 hours meant someone had died, or someone was about to. My name is Marlo Prescott, and I turned 36 years old in March of 2025, exactly 2 months before the day my parents decided that my life was worth less than a wedding cake. I live, or lived, in a 2-bedroom, high-floor condo in the Streeterville neighborhood of Chicago, a place I had bought with my own money in the summer of 2021 after 11 years of clawing my way up the corporate ladder as a senior data analyst at a healthcare consulting firm. That condo was not a gift. It was not a hand-me-down. It was the single greatest thing I had ever done for myself, $557,000 in equity built on late nights, skipped vacations, and a stubborn refusal to let anyone tell me a single woman could not own something beautiful all on her own. And on the morning of May 12, 2025, while a surgical team spent 9 hours fusing 3 vertebrae in my lower spine to correct the damage from a herniated disc that had been slowly crushing my nerve root for 2 years, my parents signed the papers to sell it. I did not know that yet, not while I was staring at that phone. What I knew was that my mother's name appeared 31 times in the missed call list. My father's name, 22. My younger sister, Bexley, 17, 3 unknown numbers, and 1 voicemail, just 1, from my father. The nurse walked in then, a soft, round woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said Renata, and she smiled at me the way people smile at fragile things. She checked the drip in my arm, adjusted the pillow behind my head, and asked me how my pain was on a scale of 1 to 10. I could not answer her. My mouth was too dry, and my brain was too busy trying to understand why the 2 people who had raised me had called me 31 and 22 times while I was strapped to an operating table. Renata brought me a small paper cup of ice chips and helped me tilt my head just enough to let one melt on my tongue. She told me the surgery had gone well. She told me the surgeon would be by in the morning. She told me my emergency contact, my fiancé Emmett, had been in the waiting room for the full 9 hours and had only just stepped out to grab a change of clothes from his car. And she told me, gently, that a lot of family members had been calling the front desk asking for updates, and that the staff had followed my written instructions and given no information to anyone except Emmett. I had written those instructions myself, 3 days before the surgery, sitting at my kitchen island with a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside me. Only Emmett was allowed to receive updates. Not my mother, not my father, not Bexley. I had told myself at the time it was just because I did not want anyone panicking or driving my fiancé crazy with questions. But the truth, the quieter truth I had not admitted even to myself, was that I did not trust them near me when I was unconscious. Something in my gut had known. Something had been trying to warn me for months. Renata left, and the door clicked shut behind her, and I pressed the voicemail with a thumb that would not stop trembling. My father's voice filled the room. Calm, casual, the same tone he used to announce that he had picked up milk on the way home from work. Hey, sweetheart, hope the surgery went well. Listen, your mother and I have been talking, and Bexley's wedding is coming up fast, and the venue and the caterer and the dress and everything else, it all came out to weigh more than we thought. We did not want to worry you before your operation, so we made an executive decision. We sold your condo. The buyer moved fast, cash offer, closed this morning while you were out cold. We signed the papers for you. We still have your power of attorney from that thing in 2019, so it is all above board. The money is already in the account, and it will cover the wedding and leave a little extra for Bexley and Trenton to start their life together. You were unconscious, so we handled it. We can talk when you are feeling better. Love you, bye. The phone slipped out of my hand and landed on the blanket. I stared at the ceiling tiles, at the little dots in the acoustic panels, and I counted them because counting was the only thing my brain could do. 9 hours. I had been unconscious for 9 hours. In those 9 hours, they had not just called me. They had gone to my condo, used the spare key I had given my mother for emergencies back in 2019 when I had the flu and needed her to bring me soup, and they had opened my safe. They had taken the deed. They had taken every document. And they had used a power of attorney that I had signed 6 years ago when I was flying to Singapore for a work conference and wanted my father to be able to handle a leaking pipe if my building called him. A power of attorney I had completely forgotten existed. A power of attorney I had never revoked. $557,000. Gone. My sister's wedding was in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. June 2nd, 2025, at a lakeside estate in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, that my mother had been bragging about to her book club for the entire month of April. 280 guests. A 12-piece band. A custom Vera Wang gown that had cost more than my first car. And apparently, now my home. I did not cry. That is the part I remember most clearly. I did not cry. I lay there in that narrow hospital bed with a titanium cage screwed into my spine, and I felt something inside my chest go very, very cold. Not sad, not shocked. Cold. Like someone had opened a window in a place I had not known existed and let the winter in. Emmett came back an hour later carrying a duffel bag and a coffee, and the moment he saw my face he set both down on the chair and came straight to the side of the bed. He is 39 years old, a soft-spoken civil engineer with dark curly hair and gentle brown eyes, and he has known me for 4 years and loved me every single day of it. He took my hand without asking, careful of the IV, and he waited. He did not fill the silence. He just waited, the way he always waits, and eventually I whispered the words that would change everything. They sold my condo, Emmett, my parents. They sold it while I was under. He did not react the way I expected. He did not gasp. He did not curse. He did not tell me it must be a misunderstanding. He simply closed his eyes for one long second, opened them again, and squeezed my fingers. "Okay," he murmured. "Okay, play me the voicemail." I did. He listened without moving. And when it ended, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something quiet and hard and absolutely certain. "Marlo," he asked me softly, "do you trust me to make one phone call for you tonight?" I could hardly stand. I could hardly speak. But I nodded. And that one phone call was the beginning of the end of everything my family had ever gotten away with. Emmett stepped into the hallway with my phone and closed the door behind him, and I lay there listening to the soft hum of the fluorescent light above my bed, trying to understand how a person could love someone their whole life and still not really know them. Because that was the strange thing about the voicemail. My father had not sounded guilty. He had not sounded panicked. He had sounded proud, almost, the way a man sounds when he has solved a problem cleverly and expects a thank you at the end of it. Executive decision. That was the phrase that kept turning over in my mind. Executive decision. Like my home was a line item in a spreadsheet he had the authority to move around. To understand how we got to that hospital room, you have to understand the shape of my family, because it was never a circle. It was a triangle, and I was the corner that held the other two up. My parents, Wendell and Corinne Prescott, married in 1984 in a small church in Naperville, Illinois. My father spent 32 years selling commercial insurance, and my mother taught 4th grade for 28 years before retiring in 2019. On paper, they were the kind of middle-class couple that neighbors describe as lovely people. In practice, they had a favorite child, and it was not me. Bexley arrived 7 years after I did, in the winter of 1996, and from the very first month she came home from the hospital, the temperature in our house shifted. She was the miracle baby, the surprise, the one my mother had almost given up hoping for. And I, at 7 years old, became the built-in babysitter, the responsible one, the good example, the daughter who was praised for being invisible. I do not say this with bitterness. I say it because it is the frame you need. When Bexley was 6, she wanted a pony for her birthday. She got a real one, boarded at a stable in Barrington that my parents drove her to every weekend for 4 years. When I was 13, I wanted braces because my 2 front teeth were crooked and the kids at school called me Bugs. My mother told me it was a cosmetic want, not a need, and that I should learn to smile with my mouth closed. I paid for my own braces at 24 with my first real paycheck. When Bexley graduated from high school in 2014, my parents threw her a party at a country club and gave her a white BMW as a graduation gift. When I graduated from the University of Illinois in 2011 with honors in statistics, my parents sent me a card with a $50 gift certificate to a chain restaurant and forgot to attend the ceremony because Bexley had a middle school choir concert that same weekend. I could keep going. I could tell you about the tuition they paid for Bexley's private art school in Rhode Island while I graduated with $38,000 in student loans. I could tell you about the down payment they gave her for a little bungalow in Oak Park in 2022 while never once asking how I had managed to buy my own condo in 2021. I could tell you about every birthday, every Christmas, every quiet dinner where my mother spent 40 minutes asking Bexley about her feelings and 30 seconds asking me about my job. But the point is not the list. The point is that by the time I turned 30, I had made peace with the shape of the triangle. I had built a life outside of them, a career I loved, a best friend named Delphine who felt more like a sister than Bexley ever had, a therapist named Dr. Kwan who had spent 4 years teaching me the word boundaries, and eventually, a man named Emmett who looked at me like I was the whole sky. And then, in the fall of 2023, everything with my back began to fall apart. I woke up one October morning unable to feel my right foot. An MRI showed a herniated disc at L4 and L5 that had been slowly pressing on my sciatic nerve for who knows how long. The pain that followed over the next 18 months is the kind that changes a person. There were mornings I could not put on my own socks. There were nights I slept on the bathroom floor because the tile was cool and the bed felt like knives. I tried physical therapy. I tried injections. I tried a chiropractor who nearly made things worse. And finally, in March of 2025, my neurosurgeon told me the only real option left was a spinal fusion. I told my parents about the surgery in April, over a Sunday dinner at their house, right after my mother had finished showing me a 15-minute video of Bexley trying on wedding dresses at a boutique in downtown Chicago. My father nodded, chewed his pot roast, and asked how long the recovery would be. 6 to 8 weeks minimum, I answered. 12 weeks before I could lift anything heavier than a coffee cup. He hummed thoughtfully and said, "Well, at least you will be healed up in time for the wedding." My mother said nothing. She was scrolling on her phone, looking at floral arrangements. Bexley, sitting across from me in a cream-colored sweater, twirled her engagement ring and asked if the surgery would leave a visible scar, because she needed me to look presentable in the family photos. Her fiancé, Trenton, a 34-year-old commercial real estate broker with a jaw that looked like it had been drawn by a cartoonist, chuckled and told her to be nice. I did not react. I had learned over 3 decades that reacting was expensive. I finished my pot roast, complimented my mother's gravy, and drove home to my condo and cried in the elevator. That condo, let me tell you about it, because you need to see it to understand what they took. It was on the 22nd floor of a glass building 3 blocks from Lake Michigan. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open kitchen with a white quartz island where I ate every breakfast standing up, and a floor-to-ceiling window in the living room that looked out at the water. In the mornings, the sun would come off the lake and turn the whole apartment gold. In the winter, when the lake froze in cracked white sheets, the wind would rattle the glass and I would sit on my couch with a blanket and feel, for the first time in my life, safe. Truly safe. Like nobody could take this from me. Like I had finally built a room in the world that was only mine. I closed on that condo on July 19, 2021, for $612,000. I had put down $120,000 in cash, saved painfully over 9 years. By May of 2025, thanks to a rising market and the equity I had chipped away at every month, the place was worth roughly $730,000, and my remaining mortgage was $173,000. That was where the $557,000 came from. That was the net. That was the number my father had said out loud in his voicemail like it was a shopping receipt. Emmett came back into the hospital room 40 minutes later. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. He sat down on the edge of my bed and took my hand again. "I called Delphine," he told me quietly. "She is on her way to the hospital. She is bringing a lawyer she knows from her firm, a real estate litigator named Marisol Vega. Marisol is already pulling public records on your condo tonight. She said if the sale actually closed this morning like your father claims, the deed transfer would be filed with the Cook County recorder within 24 to 48 hours, but the wire for the funds would have already gone through. She said do not call your parents. Do not text them. Do not respond to anything. She said the most important thing you can do right now is nothing, until she has the documents in her hands." I nodded slowly. My best friend Delphine Ashford was a 40-year-old commercial litigator at one of the biggest law firms in Chicago, and she had been my person since our freshman year of college. If she was bringing Marisol, then Marisol was the best. Emmett squeezed my hand tighter. "There is one more thing, Marlo," he added, and his voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Marisol asked me to ask you something. She asked whether the power of attorney your father used, the one from 2019, was a general power of attorney or a limited one. Do you remember?" I closed my eyes, and I remembered. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table in my old apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, half distracted, half packing for Singapore, signing a document my father had emailed me because he said the notary at his office could stamp it for me if I just printed it and signed it. I had not read it carefully. I had trusted him. "Limited," I whispered. "It was supposed to be limited, just for the pipe. Just for that one emergency." Emmett exhaled slowly. "Marisol said if that is true, then what your parents did today was not just wrong. It was a crime." I did not sleep that night. Not really. The pain medication kept pulling me under in little waves, and every time I surfaced, the reality would hit me again like a slap. My condo. Their signatures. My name. The word crime, sitting in the middle of the room like a stone Emmett had placed there before he went to the recliner to try to rest. At 6:45 the next morning, Delphine walked through the door of my hospital room carrying 2 cups of coffee, a leather folder, and a woman I had never met before. Marisol Vega was in her early 50s, short and sharp-featured, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a low bun and a charcoal gray suit that fit her like armor. She did not smile when she introduced herself. She simply set her folder on the rolling tray, pulled a chair to the side of my bed, and looked at me with the calm intensity of a surgeon about to open a chest. "Marlo," she began, "I need you to walk me through the last 72 hours in as much detail as your memory will allow. Then I need every document you have access to on your phone or your email regarding that condo, the mortgage, the deed, and the 2019 power of attorney. And I need to know, before we do anything else, whether you are willing to press criminal charges against your parents if the evidence supports it. Because if you are not willing, we are playing a very different game." Emmett was standing by the window. Delphine was sitting on the edge of the recliner. Both of them were watching me, and I realized, in that moment, that this was the first real fork in the road of my entire adult life. To my left was the daughter I had always been, the one who kept the peace, who smiled at Thanksgiving, who told herself blood was thicker than water even when the water was clean and the blood was poisoning her. To my right was a woman I had not met yet, a woman who would say the thing out loud. I looked Marisol in the eye. "Yes," I answered. "If the evidence supports it, I want them charged." She nodded once, opened her folder, and got to work. By 8:30 that morning, I had given her access to my email, my cloud drive, and my Documents Safe app. Delphine had already dispatched a paralegal from her firm to the Cook County Recorder's office to pull every filing from the last 48 hours related to my address. Marisol had a title company contact who was digging into the sale from the other end. And Emmett, bless him, was standing at the foot of my bed reading me options from the hospital menu like it was any other Tuesday, because he understood that if he stopped acting normal, I would break. The first piece of evidence came in at 9:17 a.m. Marisol's paralegal had located the deed transfer, filed at 7:42 a.m. the previous morning, May 12, 2025. The buyer was listed as a limited liability company called Halstead Bridge Holdings, LLC, based out of a P.O. box in Rosemont, Illinois. The sale price on the deed was recorded as $680,000, roughly $50,000 below what a fair market appraisal would have shown, but well above the mortgage. The signature on the seller's line was mine. My name, in my handwriting, or something that looked enough like it to pass a casual glance. Except I had been unconscious at 7:42 a.m. Marisol pulled up the 2019 power of attorney next. I had emailed it to her at 7 that morning from my cloud backup. She read it twice, then a third time, and then she looked up at me with the first hint of a smile I had seen on her face. "Marlo," she informed me, "this document is a limited power of attorney. Very limited. It authorizes Wendell Prescott to act on your behalf for one specific purpose: to coordinate emergency repairs and communicate with your building management at your previous address, the apartment on West Fullerton, during a defined period from October 1st, 2019 through November 30th, 2019. It expired 6 years ago. It never applied to the Streeterville condo. And it never, under any circumstances, granted him authority to sell real property." The room went very still. Delphine let out a low whistle from the recliner. Marisol continued, tapping her pen against the document. "So we have a document that has been expired for 6 years, that was never valid for this property, that was never valid for a real estate sale, and that was used, presumably along with a forged signature, to transfer title on a home worth over $700,000. That is not a family misunderstanding. That is deed fraud. That is forgery. That is theft by deception. Depending on how the wire was processed, we may also be looking at wire fraud, which is a federal charge. And there is a very real chance the buyer is going to be a problem too, because either they were incompetent or they were complicit." I felt my hands start to shake. Emmett came around and held them. "What about the money?" I whispered. "Where is the money?" Marisol had already pulled up the second document. Her voice sharpened. "Based on the closing statement my title contact just sent me, the wire went out yesterday afternoon at 2:11 p.m. to a joint checking account at First Midwest Bank in the names of Wendell and Corrine Prescott. Not to you, not to your account. To theirs, which is another crime. Because even if a valid power of attorney had existed, the proceeds of any sale would have been required to flow to the property owner. That is you, not them." I stared at the ceiling again. The dots, I counted them. There was a knock at the door then. A soft, apologetic knock, the kind hospitals train their staff to give. Renata poked her head in and told me my surgeon was on his way for the morning check, and also that my mother was in the lobby demanding to see me and refusing to leave. Delphine stood up. "Absolutely not," she stated flatly. Marisol raised one hand. "Wait, actually this could be useful. Marlo, are you comfortable with your mother being told that you are not accepting visitors, in writing, on hospital letterhead? It creates a paper trail. It shows she attempted contact after the sale and was formally refused. It closes a door she cannot pretend later she did not know was closed." I nodded. Renata disappeared to speak to the charge nurse, and within 20 minutes a printed notice had been placed at the front desk, formally denying my mother access. According to Renata, who came back afterward looking mildly rattled, my mother had cried, then argued, then threatened to call hospital administration, and finally left in a rage after slamming the front door hard enough to make the receptionist jump. My surgeon arrived at 10. He was a soft-spoken man named Dr. Adjora who informed me the fusion had gone beautifully, that my nerve root was decompressed, and that if I followed instructions, I would be walking short distances within a week and driving in 6. He did not know that my life had already collapsed on the outside while he was rebuilding my spine on the inside. I did not tell him. I let him have his good news. After he left, Marisol laid out the plan. "Step 1, she declared. We revoke the 2019 power of attorney formally today, in writing, notarized. Even though it is already expired and never applied, we close the door completely. Step 2, we file an emergency motion in Cook County Circuit Court on Monday morning to void the deed transfer on grounds of fraud and to place a lease pendens on the property, which means no one can resell it or refinance it while the litigation is pending. Step 3, we contact the Illinois Attorney General's Real Estate Fraud Unit and the Chicago Police Department's Financial Crimes Division, and we file a formal criminal complaint. Step 4, we freeze that joint account. Step 5, we deal with the buyer, Halstead Bridge Holdings, and figure out very quickly whether they are a victim or a co-conspirator. And step 6, and this is the one I want you to think about carefully, Marlo. We decide when and how and where you want your parents to find out that you know. I looked at her. The wedding, I whispered. The wedding is in 3 weeks. They think I do not know yet. They think I am still under. They are planning to spend my money in front of 280 guests. Marisol's smile came back, small, cold, precise. Then let them, she replied. Let them plan every last detail. Let them send the checks. Let them book the flowers. And let us decide together exactly when the music stops. The next 4 days in that hospital room were the strangest 4 days of my life. On the outside, I was a patient healing from major spinal surgery. Nurses came and went. Physical therapists helped me sit up, then stand, then take 3 shuffling steps to the bathroom and back while sweat ran down my temples. Emmett slept in the recliner every single night and left only to shower and change. Delphine brought me real food from a Thai place we both loved. On the inside, I was building a case. Marisol filed the revocation of the 2019 power of attorney at 2 p.m. on Wednesday. By Thursday morning, an emergency motion had been drafted and was ready for Monday filing. By Thursday afternoon, a private investigator named Reese Kowalski, a former Chicago detective Marisol used on cases like mine, had begun quietly digging into Halstead Bridge Holdings, LLC. What he found in less than 72 hours made Marisol lean back in her chair for the first time and actually laugh out loud. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a lawyer who has just been handed a gift. Halstead Bridge Holdings, LLC had been formed in the state of Illinois on March 11, 2025, 2 months before the sale. The registered agent on file was a small law office in Schaumburg. The sole managing member listed on the formation documents was a man named Trenton Vasquez Halstead. Trenton, my sister's fiancé. The buyer of my condo was my future brother-in-law. I remember Marisol turning her laptop around so I could see the screen with my own eyes, and I remember the exact way my stomach dropped, because up until that moment, there had still been a small, stupid part of me that wanted to believe my parents had been swept up in some kind of terrible mistake. That maybe a real buyer had pressured them. That maybe the money was going somewhere legitimate. That maybe, just maybe, they were not entirely who I now knew they were. But there was Trenton's name, in black and white, on a company he had formed 2 months before my surgery date was even scheduled. Which meant they had planned this. All of them, my father, my mother, my sister, and Trenton, they had known, from the moment I told them the surgery date at that Sunday dinner in April, that I would be unconscious for a full 9 hours on May 12th. They had used those 9 hours the way a thief uses a locked door with the key hidden under the mat. Delphine, who had come by on her lunch break, closed her eyes and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Marlo, she whispered, I am so sorry. I did not answer. I did not need to, because something inside me that had been shaking for 4 days finally stopped shaking. It went completely still, and in that stillness, I made a decision. I turned to Marisol. I want the wedding, I stated quietly. I do not want to stop it. I want it to happen. I want every guest there. I want the band playing. I want my mother wearing the dress she has been bragging about. I want my sister at the altar. And I want the whole thing served to them publicly at the exact right moment. Can you do that? Marisol tilted her head, considering me. Legally, she replied slowly, we can do almost anything we want with timing, as long as the lease pendens is filed on Monday and the criminal complaint is filed shortly after. The wedding itself is not a legal event we need to interrupt. It is a social event. And how you choose to handle the social side of this is entirely up to you. But I have to ask, Marlo, are you sure? Because a public confrontation, no matter how justified, is a thing you cannot take back. Once you do it, that footage, those witnesses, that memory, it lives forever. I looked at Emmett. He was sitting on the edge of my bed, holding my left hand between both of his. He met my eyes and nodded once. He was not going to talk me out of anything. He was going to stand next to me while I did it. I looked back at Marisol. I am sure, I answered. My whole life they have counted on me being quiet. They counted on it when they signed my name. They are counting on it right now. They think I am going to swallow this like I have swallowed everything else. I am not going to yell at them in a hospital room where nobody can see. I am going to let them build the biggest, most expensive, most public stage of their lives, and I am going to walk onto it and take it back. Delphine let out a low, slow breath. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Marlo, okay. For the next 3 weeks, we became a machine. Monday morning, Marisol filed the emergency motion in Cook County Circuit Court. The Lee's pendants hit the property record by end of business that day. Halstead Bridge Holdings LLC could not resell the condo, could not refinance it, could not touch it. Trenton, whether he checked those records or not, was now legally frozen. Tuesday, Marisol walked into the Chicago Police Department's Financial Crimes Division with a folder 2 inches thick. Deed fraud. Forgery. Elder financial exploitation, ironically, because I was the adult child whose asset had been taken. Wire fraud referral to the FBI, based on the interstate wire transfer that had moved through a correspondent bank in New York. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Sergeant Havorson, listened for 40 minutes without interrupting, then looked up and said one sentence. "We will handle this quietly until you tell us not to." Wednesday, Marisol had a discreet conversation with Halstead Bridge Holdings LLC's registered agent, letting them know, without accusation, that the property they had purchased was subject to litigation and that their client might want to consult counsel. The registered agent, according to Marisol, went very silent on the other end of the phone. Trenton did not know yet that we knew, but his lawyer did. Thursday, my parents finally reached me. My father sent a long text saying he understood I was probably upset, but that I needed to see the big picture, and that once the wedding was over, we could all sit down as a family and discuss how to make things right. He mentioned, casually, that they had already used $140,000 of the proceeds to pay off the final wedding invoices, and that another $60,000 was earmarked for the honeymoon in the Maldives, and that the rest would sit in a family account for future needs. He signed it, "Love, Dad." I did not respond. Marisol told me not to, and I did not need her to tell me twice. Silence at that point was the most powerful thing I owned. Friday, I was discharged from the hospital. Emmett drove me to his apartment in Lincoln Park, because my condo was, technically, no longer mine on paper, and Marisol had advised me not to set foot in it until the deed was formally voided. Emmett's place was a warm 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a brownstone, with hardwood floors and a small balcony full of herb pots. He had cleared out half his closet for me. He had put a folding chair in the shower so I could sit down. He had bought a body pillow that cost $80 because he read online that spine patients healed better with proper alignment. I cried, finally, when I saw the pillow. It was the first time I cried since the voicemail. Over the next 2 weeks, while my back healed and I graduated from a walker to a cane to short unassisted walks, Bexley called me 3 times and my mother called me 11. I did not answer any of them. Marisol had drafted a single short response for me to send if either of them escalated to showing up at Emmett's building, but they never did. My father, after the one long text, went silent, which was, in its own way, the most telling thing of all. A truly innocent father would have kept trying. A guilty one shut up and waited for the wedding to smooth everything over. Delphine, meanwhile, was helping me draft something else. A speech, not a long one, not an angry one, something short, something clean, something that would land like a blade. And Emmett, on the Saturday 1 week before the wedding, sat down beside me on his couch and quietly said the words I had been waiting to hear without realizing I was waiting. "Marlo," he whispered, "do you still want to marry me?" I turned my head to look at him. "Because if you do," he continued, "I have been thinking, and I want us to be married before you walk into that wedding. I want them to see you as my wife, not as their daughter. Not as Bexley's older sister. As Marlo Sinclair, my wife. And I want to be the man standing next to you when you do what you are about to do, not just as your fiancé, as your husband, legally, fully, publicly." I did not cry that time. I just leaned my forehead against his shoulder, careful of my back, and I whispered yes. We got married on Thursday, May 29th, 2025, at the Cook County Clerk's office in downtown Chicago, 4 days before my sister's wedding. It was the smallest, quietest, most beautiful ceremony I could have imagined. I wore a simple ivory silk dress that Delphine had ordered rush from a boutique in the West Loop, and I stood barefoot on the courthouse carpet because I could not yet comfortably wear heels. Emmett wore a charcoal suit and the tie his grandfather had given him when he graduated from engineering school. Delphine was our witness. So was Emmett's older brother Ambrose, a warm, bearded man who flew in from Denver that morning specifically to be there. There were 4 people in that little room: the clerk, the efficient, Delphine, and Ambrose, and us. I remember the efficient asking if I took Emmett as my lawfully wedded husband, and I remember laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in 3 weeks. Because the word lawfully felt like a gift. Everything about the previous 3 weeks had been about lawlessness. About people who had decided that laws did not apply to them when it came to me. And here, in this little fluorescent room with a stranger reading vows off a laminated card, the law was finally on my side. The law was finally being spoken over my life the way it was supposed to be. Lawfully, legally, willingly, with my consent. Yes, I answered, I do. Afterward, the 4 of us went to a small Italian restaurant in River North and ate pasta, and split a bottle of wine, and Delphine gave a toast that made me cry into my napkin. She raised her glass and told the table that in 22 years of friendship, she had watched me apologize for existing more times than she could count, and that she was so grateful, so profoundly grateful, that she got to sit across from a woman who had finally decided to stop. To Marlo, she toasted, who is done being small. To Marlo, Emmett echoed, my wife. Ambrose lifted his glass and did not say a word. He just smiled at me with tears in his eyes. He had lost his own wife to cancer 3 years earlier, and I think, watching Emmett that day, he was watching a version of his own past come alive again through his brother. I loved him instantly. The next morning, Friday, was the day the criminal side of the case broke wide open. Sergeant Halvorson called Marisol at 9:15. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office had reviewed the evidence and had signed off on charges. Formal arrest warrants would be issued the following Monday, June 2nd, at 10 a.m. for Wendell Prescott, Corrine Prescott, and Trenton Vasquez Halstead. My sister Bexley had not been named on any formation documents, and there was no financial evidence, yet, that she had directly participated in the forgery, but she was a person of interest and would likely be interviewed. Monday, June 2nd, at 10 a.m. the wedding day. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. in Lake Geneva. The arrest warrants would drop 6 hours before Bexley walked down the aisle. Marisol asked me how I wanted to handle it. I sat on Emmett's balcony for a long time that Friday afternoon, Kane leaning against the railing, watching the sun move across the sky. And I thought about my sister, because that was the part that had been quietly aching in the corner of my chest for 3 weeks, and I had not let myself look at it. Bexley, my little sister. The girl I had taught to ride a bike in the driveway when she was 7 and I was 14. The girl I had held all night when her first boyfriend broke up with her the summer she was 16. The girl I had bought concert tickets for as a college graduation gift because our parents had forgotten. Bexley, who had grown up soaked in every ounce of love our parents had to give, and who had, somewhere along the way, decided that my life was a resource pool she could dip into. I thought about whether she had known, whether she had sat at that Sunday dinner in April and heard my surgery date and quietly turned it into a countdown clock. Whether Trenton had told her about Halstead Bridge Holdings, whether she had signed off on it with a shrug and a sip of Prosecco. And I realized, sitting there, that I did not actually know. I did not know if she was a co-conspirator or a spoiled bystander. I did not know if she was cruel or just profoundly, unforgivably self-absorbed. Both were possible, both were painful. I called Marisol back. I want the arrests to happen at the wedding, I informed her. Not before, not after. At the wedding, in front of everyone, and I want to be there when they do. She was silent for a long moment. Marlo, she replied carefully. That is your right. I can coordinate with Sergeant Halvorson on timing. She has some flexibility on when the warrants are executed as long as it is within a reasonable window. But I want you to hear me on one thing. Once we go this route, there is no version of this story where you are the villain. There is only a version where you are the woman who took back what was hers. But you will not be the only one who suffers. 280 guests will watch this, extended family, your parents' friends. Colleagues, anyone with a phone will film it. Your sister will remember this day for the rest of her life. Are you prepared to be the person who did that? I closed my eyes. Marisol, I answered. My sister will remember this day for the rest of her life either way. The only question is whether she remembers it as the day she got everything she wanted using my body as a piggy bank, or as the day the world learned what our family actually is. I am not the one who chose this stage. They chose it. I am just showing up. Marisol exhaled. Understood, she confirmed. I will call Sergeant Havorson. The rest of the weekend passed in a strange, floating calm. I slept better than I had in weeks. Emmett rented a black SUV with a driver for Monday because I still could not sit comfortably in a low sedan for more than an hour, and Lake Geneva was 90 minutes north. Delphine drove up separately with her husband Roman. Marisol coordinated with Sergeant Havorson, who arranged for 2 unmarked units from the Walworth County Sheriff's Department, in cooperation with Cook County and Illinois State Police, to be staged near the venue in the early afternoon. The warrants would be executed at exactly 4:15 p.m., 15 minutes into the ceremony, at a signal from me. That was the piece I had insisted on. The signal, it would come from me. Sunday night, I sat on the balcony one last time and read a letter I had not planned to write. Emmett had suggested it. He said, gently, that whatever happened on Monday, I might want to give my parents one final chance. Not for their sake. For mine. So that no matter what came after, I could say, honestly, that I had opened one last door before I closed it forever. I wrote the letter in 20 minutes, 3 paragraphs. I did not mention the police. I did not mention the deed. I did not mention the lawsuit. I wrote only this. Mom and Dad, I know what you did. I know the condo was sold on May 12th while I was under anesthesia. I know the signature on the deed was not mine. I know the money is in your joint account. If you return every dollar to me by 9 a.m. Monday morning, before the wedding, along with a written admission and a formal notarized withdrawal of any claim to my property, I will consider closing this quietly. If you do not, everything that follows will be a matter of public record. I love you, that is why I am giving you this chance. It is the last one you will get, Marlo. I sent it by certified email, with delivery and read receipts, at 10 p.m. Sunday night. By 7 the next morning, both had been opened. Neither had been answered. Marisol called me at 7:45. They are not going to return it, she stated. They think you are bluffing. I looked at Emmett across the kitchen. He was pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He looked up and met my eyes. Then we go to Lake Geneva, I replied. The drive up to Lake Geneva on the morning of June 2nd, 2025, was the quietest 90 minutes of my life. Emmett sat next to me in the back of the SUV, holding my hand, occasionally squeezing my fingers, saying nothing. The driver, a soft-spoken older man named Gus, kept the radio off. Outside, the Wisconsin fields rolled past in early June green, and the sky was that clean pale blue that summer weddings dream about. My mother had picked the perfect day. Of course she had. She had picked every day of her life to be perfect for someone. I was wearing a floor-length navy blue dress with long sleeves and a soft draped back, chosen specifically because it did not press against my incision. My hair was pulled into a low chignon by a hairstylist Delphine had sent to Emmett's apartment at 6 that morning. I wore small pearl earrings that had belonged to my father's mother, a woman named Iris who had died when I was 10 and who had, until now, been my only good memory of that side of the family. Iris had once told me, sitting on her front porch in Springfield the summer I was 8, that a woman without her own name in her own mouth was just a shadow. I had not understood her at the time. I understood her now. We arrived at the venue at 3:15. It was, as promised, absurdly beautiful. A limestone estate on a rise above the lake, with a long green lawn sloping down toward a white tent for the reception and a smaller floral arch at the water's edge for the ceremony. 280 white chairs were arranged in perfect rows, string quartet warming up, servers in black vests moving quietly. My mother's favorite florist had done the arrangements, and I could smell the peonies from the gravel drive. Nobody was expecting me. That was the other detail I had asked for. I had not RSVP'd. My mother had assumed I was still bedridden and had, according to a distant cousin, Delphine had discreetly called for information, told everyone I was too weak from surgery to attend, and sent my regrets. My name was not on the seating chart. My place at the family table had been quietly removed. I did not mind, I had not come to sit. Emmett helped me out of the SUV, I steadied myself on my cane. Delphine and Roman met us in the parking lot. Delphine was wearing a deep burgundy dress and holding a small leather clutch that contained, among other things, 3 copies of the void deed order Marisol's firm had obtained late Sunday afternoon, a printed copy of the arrest warrants, and a single folded page containing my speech. Marisol herself was already inside, seated inconspicuously toward the back with 2 colleagues. Sergeant Havorson and the Walworth County deputies were staged at a service road just out of sight of the main event. We moved slowly around the side of the venue as the guests began to fill their seats. The music started at 3:55. My father, at the front of the aisle in a black tuxedo with a white pocket square, took his place beside the officiant, beaming. My mother, in a champagne-colored beaded gown, was escorted to the front row on the arm of Trenton's father. Bexley, hidden inside the estate, was still being buttoned into her Vera Wang gown by 2 attendants. At exactly 4 p.m., the music shifted, and Trenton walked down the aisle with his mother. He was smiling, handsome, confident. He did not know that a warrant with his name on it was sitting in a manila envelope on the passenger seat of an unmarked SUV 400 yards away. At 4:06, the doors at the back of the aisle opened, and Bexley emerged on my father's arm. She was breathtaking, I will say that. Her dress caught the afternoon sun and turned into something molten and white. Her hair was swept up, her makeup soft, her bouquet an explosion of peonies and eucalyptus. She was smiling like every childhood dream she had ever been sold was coming true in slow motion. And in a strange, painful way, I was glad she got to have that moment. Because it was the last moment of her old life, and I wanted her to feel it one last time before it ended. She walked, my father beamed. The guests turned in their seats and murmured their appreciation. My mother dabbed her eye with a handkerchief. Cameras clicked. At 4:12, Bexley reached the altar. My father kissed her forehead, placed her hand in Trenton's, and stepped to his seat in the front row next to my mother. The officiant began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. And that was when I stepped out from behind the last row of white chairs, cane in one hand, Emmett steady at my elbow, Delphine 3 steps behind with the folder, and walked down the outer edge of the aisle toward the front. The murmuring began before anyone even recognized me. A woman in a lavender dress turned first, then a man in the 3rd row, then a ripple, quick and quiet, moved through the crowd like wind on water. Heads turned. Phones came up. I did not look at any of them. I looked only at the altar. My mother saw me first. Her face went the color of the champagne on her dress. My father saw me second, his mouth opened. Bexley turned last, and her expression, the pure uncomprehending shock on her face, will stay with me until I die. She had not known I was coming. None of them had. The officiant stopped speaking. The string quartet trailed off. 280 guests fell silent. I stopped 10 feet from the altar, close enough to be heard without raising my voice. Far enough that everyone behind me could see my face and everyone in front of me could see theirs. I lifted my chin. Bexley, I began softly. I am so sorry to interrupt your wedding. I really am. I did not come here to ruin the happiest day of your life. I came here because there is something the 280 people sitting in these chairs, and the man you are about to marry, and our parents, all deserve to know before the vows are exchanged. Because vows only work when the people saying them are honest. And this family has not been honest with anyone, including itself, for a very long time. My father stood up. Marlowe, he snapped, this is not the time. I turned my head slowly and looked at him. Sit down, Dad, I replied. You had your time. On May 12th at 7:42 in the morning, while I was under anesthesia for a 9-hour spinal fusion, you had your time. You have had your time for 36 years. This is mine. He sat down. I do not think he even realized he was doing it. Something in my voice, or maybe in my face, made him fold back into that chair like a man whose legs had stopped listening to him. I turned back to the crowd. For anyone here who does not know me, my name is Marlo Prescott Sinclair. I am the older daughter of Wendell and Corrine Prescott. I am the older sister of the bride. And 4 days ago, I married a wonderful man named Emmett Sinclair in a small ceremony in Chicago, which none of my family attended, because none of my family was invited. Emmett, standing at my side, lifted his chin. 3 weeks ago, I continued, on May 12, 2025, I underwent major spinal surgery. While I was unconscious on the operating table, my parents entered my condo in Streeterville using a spare key I had given my mother years ago. They used an expired power of attorney from 2019 that had never applied to that property. They forged my signature. And they sold my home for $680,000 to a limited liability company called Halstead Bridge Holdings. I paused. Halstead Bridge Holdings was formed on March 11th of this year. Its sole managing member is a man named Trenton Vasquez Halstead, the groom. The gasp that moved through those 280 guests was the loudest silence I have ever heard. Trenton's face did something I will never forget. It did not go pale. It did not go red. It went blank. Every muscle in his jaw released at once, and for a half-second before he could catch himself, his mouth actually fell open. Then, very slowly, he closed it. He looked at my sister. He looked at my father. He looked at me. And then he did the stupidest thing a guilty man can do in that situation. He tried to smile. He tried to smile, and the smile did not fit his face. It slid off him like water off wax. Bexley, still holding her bouquet, turned to him. Her voice, when it came out, was smaller than I had ever heard it. "Trenton," she whispered, "what is she talking about?" He opened his mouth to answer. Nothing came out. My mother, in the front row, stood up so quickly her chair tipped backward. Her hands were shaking. "Marlo," she hissed, in a voice she probably thought was quiet but which carried across the entire lawn. "You do not know what you are doing. You do not know what you are throwing away. Sit down, we can fix this. We can talk about this like a family. Not here, please, not here." I looked at her. My mother, Corrine Prescott, the woman who had given birth to me, who had walked me into my first day of kindergarten. Who had, at some point I could no longer identify, decided that my life belonged to her the way a savings bond belongs to whoever is willing to cash it. "Mom," I answered. "I gave you until 9 this morning to return the money. I sent you the email. I gave you every chance. You opened it at 7:53, you read it, you chose this. I did not." She sat down. Or rather, she collapsed sideways onto my father's shoulder, and my father, for the first time in his life that I could remember, did not put his arm around her. He just sat there with his hands folded in his lap, staring at the grass in front of his shoes. Delphine stepped forward and handed me the folder. I opened it slowly, deliberately, so every camera phone in that lawn could see what was inside. I turned to the crowd again. "This is a certified copy of an emergency court order issued on May 19, 2025, by the Circuit Court of Cook County. It voids the deed transfer of my condominium at Streeterville on grounds of fraud and forgery. As of today, that property is legally mine again, and it always was. This is a certified copy of the criminal complaint filed on May 20th with the Chicago Police Department and the Illinois Attorney General's Real Estate Fraud Unit. And this," I stated, lifting the third document, "is a copy of the 3 arrest warrants that will be executed at this venue in approximately 3 minutes." The word warrants landed on the crowd like a stone in a pond. Bexley made a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a word. She looked at Trenton again. He was already backing up from the altar. Slowly, 1 step, 2 steps. "Do not run," I ordered him quietly. "It will only make it worse." He stopped. At 4:15 exactly, as promised, 2 black unmarked SUVs rolled slowly up the gravel drive. 4 uniformed deputies stepped out, along with Sergeant Haverson in a gray blazer. They did not run. They did not shout. They walked, unhurried, up the lawn toward the altar, and every guest in every chair turned to watch them come. Sergeant Haverson stopped beside me. She nodded once at me, then turned to face the altar. "Wendell Prescott," she declared clearly, "Corrine Prescott, Trenton Vasquez Halstead, you are each under arrest. The charges include forgery, deed fraud, theft by deception, and wire fraud." You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." She kept reading. Her voice was steady and calm, the voice of a woman who had done this 1,000 times and understood that dignity, even in a moment like this, was the last kindness a police officer could offer. My father did not resist. He stood up when a deputy approached him. He turned. He put his hands behind his back. His face was empty. I do not know what he was thinking. I do not know if I will ever know. He did not look at me as they cuffed him. My mother protested loudly at the wedding, claiming it was a misunderstanding. The deputy waited, then gently cuffed her. Trenton was the worst. He grabbed Bexley's wrist, hissing something that made her crumple. When cuffed, he looked at me with pure, calculating hatred, genuinely believing he would get away with stealing from me. The arrest took less than 7 minutes. Bexley stood alone at the altar, crushing her bouquet, while the guests sat in silence. I told Bexley I loved her, but I was not her bank. Our future relationship was up to her. Heartbroken, I packed my emotions away and left with Emmett and Delphine. People were recording, and the video would soon go viral, but I only knew my name was finally my own. The next 48 hours were chaotic. The arrest videos made me an internet hero. Legally, Trenton flipped immediately. He admitted my father orchestrated the scheme to buy my condo using my parents' money, planning to transfer it to Bexley after the wedding. They decided my success should be given to their favorite child. Trenton claimed my father said they already had my forged signature. That single sentence would put my parents in prison. Bexley claimed ignorance, though she knew about a surprise gift. My parents refused to confess and were released on bond, while Trenton faced federal charges. The condo was returned to me, and the frozen funds would provide 95% restitution. My Aunt Georgette called to apologize for years of ignoring my parents' behavior. I cried and asked her to just know the real me. Bexley texted, denying she knew about the forged signature. I replied we would talk someday when my lawyer allowed it, provided she told me the absolute truth. The following months brought a strange mix of grief and joy. I mourned my parents but celebrated finding my life. I healed physically and returned to work part-time. My boss was incredibly supportive, welcoming me back with a kind note. I cried at my desk, then got to work. The criminal case moved along its slow, grinding path. Trenton pleaded guilty in early August in exchange for a reduced sentence. He got 4 years in federal prison for wire fraud, plus a concurrent state sentence for forgery and deed fraud. His bar, if he ever had one, was over. His real estate license was revoked. His name was permanently on a public registry that any future employer or landlord could search. Bexley did not visit him in jail. She did not attend the plea hearing. Her engagement, according to a mutual cousin, had been quietly dissolved in a lawyer's office on the 3rd of July. She kept the ring, sold it, and used the money to pay off a portion of the wedding expenses my parents could no longer cover. My parents fought their charges. My father hired an aggressive defense attorney who tried, at first, to argue that the 2019 power of attorney had been reasonably relied upon. Marisol demolished that argument in a pretrial motion so thoroughly that the defense attorney switched strategies within a week. By September, my parents had accepted a plea deal that involved formal admissions of guilt, full restitution of the funds already frozen in their account, and probation with no active jail time for my mother due to her age and clean record, and 18 months in state custody for my father. He would begin serving his sentence in November. I was not in the courtroom the day the deal was accepted. Marisol was, Delphine was, my Aunt Georgette was, Emmett was, sitting in the second row on my behalf. I chose not to go because I did not need to see it. I had already had my day in court, on a lawn in Lake Geneva, in front of 280 witnesses. Emmett moved into my condo with me at the end of July. I had gone back for the first time on July 11th, a Friday afternoon, alone except for Delphine, who waited in the lobby to give me a moment upstairs by myself. I opened the door with a shaking hand. I stepped inside. The blanket was still on the couch, exactly where I had left it. The refrigerator hummed. The window glowed with afternoon sun. Everything was where I had left it, and yet the whole apartment felt subtly changed, the way a house feels after someone dies in it, even though nobody had died. Something had almost died. Something had been rescued at the last possible minute. I walked to the window. I stood there for a long time. Then I went to the closet, pulled out the throw pillow my mother had given me as a housewarming gift in 2021, a cream-colored linen thing with the words "Home Sweet Home" embroidered on it in cursive, and I dropped it into the trash. That was the only thing I threw away. That was enough. Emmett kept his apartment for a few more months, then let his lease go in October. We hung his engineering diplomas next to my statistics degree in the second bedroom, which we turned into a shared home office. His herb pots came to the balcony. His grandmother's cast iron pan came to my kitchen. Piece by piece, my condo stopped being my condo and became our home. The word "our" still surprises me sometimes when I say it out loud. I lived alone for so long that "our" feels like a language I am still learning, but I am learning it every day. Delphine and Roman had us over for dinner every other Sunday. Aunt Georgette drove up from Springfield once a month with a tin of her grandmother's oatmeal cookies and a fresh pack of tea. Ambrose called Emmett twice a week and me once a week, and became, over the summer, something between an older brother and a friend to me. My therapist, Dr. Kwan, and I began meeting weekly instead of monthly. And slowly, patiently, we began unpacking not just what my parents had done in May of 2025, but what my parents had been doing since March of 1989, when I was born. And my mother had, according to a story Aunt Georgette told me one afternoon in August, cried in the hospital because she had wanted a boy first. That single detail, told by my aunt over tea, unlocked something in me. I did not become a bitter person because of it. I became a clearer one. I finally understood that the shape of the triangle in my family had not started with Bexley. It had started with me, with who I had been from the moment I arrived. Not what I had done, not how I had behaved. Just who I was, a daughter my mother had not wanted first. A daughter my father had loved in the distracted, dutiful way men of his generation love a firstborn who is not quite the sequel they had planned. Everything after that had been the water finding its level. That understanding did not make me forgive them. Not yet, maybe not ever, but it did make me stop being angry in the way I had been angry all summer. It replaced the anger with something quieter. Sadness, mostly. And a strange kind of pity for the two people who had spent 36 years underestimating me and would now spend the rest of their lives explaining to their friends why their oldest daughter did not come home for Thanksgiving. Bexley and I did not speak until October. Marisol cleared me to have contact once the criminal case was formally closed. We met at a small coffee shop in Andersonville on a Saturday morning. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her hair was shorter. She was not wearing makeup. She sat across from me with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and for the first 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she began to talk. She told me she had known something was being planned. She told me she had chosen not to ask. She told me that on the morning of May 12th, at the exact moment I had been under anesthesia, she had been at a spa in the Loop getting her nails done, and that she had felt, at one point, a strange chill on the back of her neck, and had wondered whether I was okay in surgery, and had pushed the thought away because it was uncomfortable. She told me she had asked our father, 3 days before the wedding, where the money for the venue had actually come from, and he had told her not to worry about it. She had chosen not to worry. She told me she was sorry. And then she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said the thing I had not expected. She informed me that she had started seeing a therapist in July, that she had asked her therapist, at their 4th session, what kind of person lets a thing like this happen, and that her therapist, a woman named Dr. Emeka, had answered her, gently, that the kind of person who lets a thing like this happen is a person who has been trained her whole life to look away from the ways her family harms other people, because looking would mean admitting she has been benefiting from the harm. Bexley took a slow breath. "I am trying to unlearn it, Marlo," she whispered. "It is going to take me a long time, and I do not expect you to wait for me. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I am trying. And that if there is ever a day, years from now, when you are willing to see me again, I will be there." I looked at her for a long time. My sister, Bexley Prescott, 29 years old, sitting across from me without a fiancé and without a wedding and without the shield our parents had held over her for her entire life. Then start, I answered softly. Start today, and we will see where it goes. By the end of 2025, my life did not look like a story anymore. It looked like a life, which is, I have come to believe, the goal. Emmett and I were fully settled into the condo. I had repainted the second bathroom a soft sage green that I had wanted for years, but my mother had told me would look tacky. It looked beautiful. I hung a photograph over the couch that Delphine had taken at the courthouse on the day Emmett and I got married, the two of us standing barefoot on carpet, laughing about something I no longer remember. Every time I walked past it, I felt taller. My back healed on schedule. My final physical therapy appointment was in early October, and by Halloween I was walking 2 miles along the lakefront every morning before work. My surgeon, Dr. Ajora, discharged me from his care with a warm handshake and told me my recovery had been one of the smoothest he had ever seen. I did not tell him that it was because I had discovered, in the middle of it, that anger and clarity are two of the most powerful painkillers on earth. He would have thought I was joking. I was not. The condo was mine on paper again, and the funds were fully recovered by early September. I did something with that money that I had not told anyone about until Emmett found the paperwork on the kitchen counter one Sunday morning in November. I had set up a small fund, $60,000, at a nonprofit that provided legal aid to elder and adult family members whose assets had been taken through fraud by relatives. The nonprofit was based in Chicago, and Marisol sat on its board. I named the fund the Iris Prescott Fund, after my grandmother, the woman who had told me on her porch in Springfield that a shadow was not a woman. I did not name it after myself. I did not want a monument. I wanted the money to move. Emmett read the paperwork twice, set it down, walked into the kitchen, and kissed me on the forehead without saying a word. That is the kind of husband he is. He knows when a moment does not need words. My father began his 18-month sentence in mid-November. I did not visit. Aunt Georgette visits him twice a month, out of a sense of duty that I do not share and do not judge. She reports back to me only what she believes I need to know, and mostly I ask her not to report anything. My mother, on probation and living in the Naperville house alone, wrote me a letter in December. 6 handwritten pages. I read the first 2 and stopped. She had spent both pages explaining her side of the story and had not once used the word sorry. I put the letter back in its envelope and placed it in a shoebox at the top of my closet. Maybe I will finish reading it someday. Maybe I will not. Either is fine. Bexley and I began meeting once a month, always at the same coffee shop in Andersonville, always on a Saturday morning. The conversations are slow. Sometimes they are awkward. Sometimes we laugh about a childhood memory neither of us has thought about in years. Sometimes we sit in silence for a long time. She has not asked me for anything, which is, I think, the most remarkable change in her. She simply shows up. She listens. She apologizes when she has something specific to apologize for and does not apologize just to fill the air. She is not the sister I had before all this. She is a stranger who is trying, with real effort, to become someone I could love as a friend. I do not know yet if she will succeed. But she is trying, and trying is more than she has ever done, and I have decided that trying is something I can meet halfway. My Aunt Georgette hosted Christmas at her house in Springfield. Emmett and I drove down on the 23rd of December with a car full of gifts and Ambrose in the back seat, freshly flown in from Denver. Delphine and Roman came too, so did 2 of Georgette's neighbors who had nowhere else to go. Bexley was there, quietly in a red sweater, helping in the kitchen without being asked. My parents were not there. My father was where he was. My mother had been invited and had declined. It was the first Christmas of my adult life that I did not spend performing gratitude for a family that had never really seen me. It was the first Christmas that felt like Christmas. On the night of December 26th, back in the condo, Emmett and I sat on the couch with the lights off except for the tree, and I told him something I had been carrying for weeks. Emmett, I whispered, I want to have a baby. Someday, not tomorrow, maybe in a year, but I want us to try. I want to be a mother. I did not know for the longest time whether I did, because I could not imagine doing to another person what was done to me. But I know now that I would not. I know now that the thing I would give a child is the opposite of the thing I was given, and I want to give it. I want to. He looked at me with those steady brown eyes, and he put his hand on the back of my neck, gentle and warm, and he answered simply, "Then we will. When you are ready, we will." I have thought a lot, over the past 7 months, about what happened on that lawn in Lake Geneva on the 2nd of June, 2025. I have thought about whether I should have done it differently, whether a quieter confrontation would have been more mature, whether I should have let my parents face their consequences privately, without the audience, without the phones, without the video that will follow all of us for the rest of our lives. I have concluded, over many long walks along the lakefront, that I would not change it. Not because I enjoyed it. I did not. There was no satisfaction in watching my mother's face collapse or my father's hands go behind his back. There was no pleasure in Bexley standing alone at the altar. Those images will live in me forever, and I will never look at them without pain. But I would not change it, because for 36 years, my family had counted on my silence. They had counted on it the way a household counts on the electricity working. They had wired their entire way of being to the assumption that Marlo would not say anything. Marlo would not make a scene. Marlo would take her braces off the table so Bexley could have her pony. Marlo would drive herself home from her own college graduation. Marlo would let her condo be sold while she was under anesthesia and would, if given enough time and enough love bombing, come around eventually. If I had confronted them privately, they would have gaslit me privately. If I had confronted them at their kitchen table, they would have explained why I was overreacting at their kitchen table. The only place they could not gaslight me was in front of 280 witnesses and a police officer with a warrant, so that is where the conversation had to happen, not because I wanted it there, because they had put it there. If you take one thing from this story, please let it be this: your silence is not a virtue. It never was. The people in your life who benefit from your silence will call it maturity. They will call it grace. They will call it being the bigger person. But silence is only grace when it is chosen from a place of power. When it is chosen from fear, it is just fuel, and someone is always burning it. You are allowed to protect your name. You are allowed to protect your home. You are allowed to protect the version of yourself that you built quietly, night after night, while nobody was clapping. You are allowed to sign your own signature and no one else's, and you are allowed to say, out loud, at whatever altar life puts you in front of, that this is mine, and I did not consent to its taking. My grandmother Iris was right. A woman without her own name in her own mouth is just a shadow. I am not a shadow anymore. I am Marlo Prescott Sinclair. I am 36 years old. My back is healed. My home is mine. My husband is beside me. My family is smaller and truer than it has ever been. And I sleep every night in the room I built with my own 2 hands. If this story moved you, or reminded you of someone you love, or someone you used to be, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can find the people who need them. And if you have ever been the quiet one in your family, the one who was counted on to keep the peace at your own expense, I would love to hear your story in the comments. Not because your pain is content, because your voice matters. And somewhere out there, another quiet one is scrolling, and she needs to know she is not alone. Thank you for listening. Take care.